Welcome to another edition of Dead Air Live. Tonight we're going to be talking about immigration, the 35th anniversary of Oscar Romero, El Salvador, and I'd like to welcome Ephraim Rodriguez and Catherine Conley from CISPIS. Welcome.
No, thank you for having us
thanks.
tonight.
So can you tell us a little bit, what is CISPIS?
CISPIS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, is an organization that's part of the larger solidarity movement here in the United States that's been working since 1980 in El Salvador. And what we've been doing is we have been involved in getting the U.S. not to intervene politically in El Salvador. This all started with the Civil War in El Salvador, which it was from the 70s through the 80s, and it ended in 1992. That was the final, when the peace accords were signed. Now, what happened after that was that the organization experienced a shift. Now, we weren't getting involved with U.S. intervention militarily, but economically. And that's where we're going to be talking, what we're going to be talking about tonight with you.
Okay. Well, maybe we should go to that clip of El Salvador to give our viewers a sense of the territory in El Salvador. Can we go to that clip, Charlie? Not ready for the clip. That's okay. Okay. So, Catherine, tell us your role with CISPIS and tell
Sure.
us a little bit about CISPIS.
Sure. So I recently joined the organization, and what interests me in their work is the fact that, as Ephraim said, they've been involved in solidarity with the Salvadoran people since the beginning of the Civil War in 1980. And this, the war and what we continue to work for is to help build equality in this very small nation that the U.S. has been heavily involved in for decades. My personal interest in the areas, I used to, when I was in high school in Baltimore, Maryland, I was an ESL tutor, and I became good friends with some fellows from El Salvador who had come up to work as seasonal workers in my area. And when the economy went down, the U.S. government no longer gave out these seasonal visas. So instead, I went down to visit them and to meet their families and to be in their home. And it's, as Ephraim and anyone who's been there can tell you, it is an incredible country full of extremely warm and loving people. And in getting to know them and seeing their lifestyles, the extent of the inequality certainly it bothered me and motivated me to get involved, and that's how I came to know CISPIS and really be interested in the work that they're doing, because they're looking at the bigger picture of how economic systems and how government programs are impacting people all over El Salvador and in the U.S.
El Salvador is a very small country. How many people live in El Salvador?
Right now, it's estimated that El Salvador, which is roughly the size of Massachusetts, has a population of 6 to 7 million people. One of the most significant things is that even though there are 6 to 7 million people in this small country, most Salvadorans live outside of it. Salvadorans are the second largest Hispanic group here in the United States. My work with CISPIS in particular, I started working with CISPIS because I am a child of immigration. My parents came here during the war, escaping the conditions of the war, and I've been pushed to help somehow, and that's how I found CISPIS. But there's such a large number of Salvadorans living outside of the country, mainly in the United States. There are some living in Europe, there's a very significant population in Australia. But it doesn't matter what country we're talking about, because the immigration has the push for immigration has been the same.
So why do a lot of the people who live in El Salvador, why do they live outside of El Salvador? Why don't they stay there?
That's a very good question. El Salvador has been a very prosperous nation agriculturally. El Salvador has had corporations, transnational corporations involved in agriculture since the 1950s and even earlier. You might have heard of the term banana republics. There in Central America, El Salvador was one of them. Now, what happened was there was such inequality caused by repressive military governments, oligarchies, which are in El Salvador. Famously, there is said to be 14 families that make up the Salvadoran oligarchy, and at a time they owned most of the land in El Salvador.
Is that like the mafia? It almost sounds like that.
I wouldn't say quite to that extent, but as Efrain mentioned, these 14 families owned over 60% of the arable land in El Salvador.
That doesn't sound right.
Exactly, and so these were incredibly wealthy families, and this system contributed largely to the extreme inequality in the country. And as I mentioned, in 1932, there was an uprising of indigenous peasants against this system of really destitute poverty, working for these major families, and that led to a horrible massacre, which ended the uprising in 1932, and we didn't see organizing again until the late 1970s. Largely for the same reasons that had been motivating the peasants in the 1930s. And while things have progressed and things have changed since the Civil War, since the newer governments, inequality is still one of the major factors that pushes people to leave El Salvador. This is a place where opportunities are few and far between, and hard work does not necessarily mean that you're going to advance economically. And so, like immigrants from all over the world, people come to the U.S. with the belief that they will have better opportunities and be able to create a better lifestyle for their families by coming to the U.S.
The American dream.
Absolutely.
So are we I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was that the Civil War came out of inequality, and millions of Salvadorans died. Hundreds of thousands, but we say that millions because it felt like millions. The Civil War ended with a peace agreement between the guerrilla groups and the military, the government. But inequality persisted. The United States was at one time sending $1 million a day to the government, to the military of El Salvador, under our presidents, under Reagan, for example. There were initiatives in Congress. The U.S. president would talk about needing to fund the security of the region, when in reality, civilians were being killed. Peasantry, country folk. We have a word called campesino. It's campesino. It means countryside peasant. And they were being massacred. Students, university students, for thinking outside of what the government wanted them to think.
That's unbelievable. That's vicious.
Well, it is, and it's something that continues today. The fact that this focus on security, there's often, as we've heard in discussions around immigration to the U.S., a focus and an emphasis on securing the border and developing security in the nations that are sending
your border
immigrants.
Or the U.S. border?
The U.S. border.
Okay.
The U.S. border. So, and we've seen that does not decrease the number of immigrants leaving countries. And furthermore, security policies in Central America, in particularly funding the militarization of police, and the training of police by U.S. forces has shown to cause increases in violence, increases in inequality. And it's, this is something that has continued since the Civil War. Again, things have progressed and changed, but that language is still very much present.
So tell us a little bit about the traffickers and the kids that are coming over here with the American dream. Someone's dangling the carrot over these families that are spending $10,000 given to the traffickers, which the question is, are they con men? The kids get here only to end up in some prison camp in Texas awaiting something for them to go back to El Salvador. I'm totally confused. So if you can paint a better picture.
What was called the migrant child crisis, it was a humanitarian crisis in 2014. That was nothing new. Really, immigrant children have been crossing borders for decades now. And it's why is it, we should question, why is it that the media has suddenly focused on immigrant children now? Why? Because tens of thousands have been coming. And you would question, what is the carrot being dangled in front of them? Well, the reality is that thousands of Salvadorans have come to the United States, and they have been displaced. Their families have been displaced. For example, I was working in a consular office, and in this consular office, I would come across people who have been here for 15, 20 years, and they have left children behind. They left them behind because they weren't looking for an American dream. They were looking for a dream. And that's something that El Salvador, as well as other countries in the global south meaning third world countries, that's what people want. They want an opportunity. They want a future. And honestly, the streets aren't paved with gold here in the United States. They're not. We know that. We live here. I was born here, and I know it very well. But there's an opportunity. There's a future that Salvadorans can give their children, which simply sometimes it can't happen in El Salvador.
Absolutely, and I think that's another thing that's important to emphasize is that it not so much the carrot that is being dangled, but what's the fire that's burning them to get out. And in the recent attention on all the children immigrants that have come, it has garnered more media attention than usual, and particularly because of the circumstances and the declining circumstances. These aren't new, but they're in many cases are declining. And 70% of Salvadoran children who were detained at the border reported having direct personal experience with violence at home. So, and El Salvador has one of the highest rates of murder in the world, particularly of homicides of children and adolescents. And so the violence there is a very big factor. It's not the only factor. It's not a country in shambles, but it is a very large motivation to leave, and particularly for young children.
Who is murdering these children?
It's largely due to gang violence. There are all sorts of systems of corruption and of violence, but there are two particularly large gangs in El Salvador that, have contributed largely to the violence, particularly against children. They may tap one child to join a gang or a young person, and if that young person wants to go in a different direction or isn't interested, exactly. It's a very, very entrenched problem, but what has been encouraging, particularly, is that the Salvadoran government has been working to curb this violence, particularly with a recent program, Safe Streets program, that is investing in social programs as opposed to, as we mentioned earlier, securitization of or militarization of the police. But this is a program that would invest in education, in parks, in recreation, and things to deter the influence of gangs that contribute so much to the violence.
We were talking about how the perception of when I think about El Salvador, I think that it's a third world country and it's very poor and they don't have the same things that we have in America. But you painted a different picture for me earlier. Can you tell us about that, please?
Absolutely. El Salvador is living in the now. It's 2015 in El Salvador. There are cell phones, there's TV, the fashions of popular fashions are there right now. It's just that there's an incredible amount of inequality. This inequality is definitely a product of very bad economic decisions on the part of former presidential administrations in El Salvador. These were presidents who came to power with the help of the United States. The United States has always backed a particular right-wing party in El Salvador since the 50s. These are members of the oligarchy. These are businessmen who own the major corporations of El Salvador. And what has happened is that in the 90s, for example, we don't use our old currency, the colon. That was our old currency. Do you know that we actually use the American dollar? So if you go down to El Salvador and you want to go to Burger King, because we have Burger King, and you'll pay $6 for a meal, it'll be $6, 6 American dollars. This, of course, has caused tremendous effects on the economy because, in essence, our economy now depends completely on the American economy. Not only that, but a lot of these administrations in the past, they were backed by the U.S. government because the U.S. government continuously supports executive administrations that provide easy access to trade, economic policy that allows American corporations to do lots of business, pay no tax. And if you know, that's something that here in the United States we see, but really Central America has been the corporate playground since the 1950s.
You just said it. Americans can have businesses, but pay no taxes?
That's right. That's right. If you can imagine,
Really?
Yeah. If you can imagine a company like a telecommunications company that offers cell phone service, and they can hire however many people they want, they can pay them however much money they'd like, but all of a sudden, some of these workers might start a union. All of a sudden, all of the members, the workers there who are part of that union get fired the very next day. I mean, there's a lot of freedom for these corporations, a lot of inequality caused by this economic policy, and really, the end result has been this rift between people that is just widening every single year. It's widening. No, you know, there's a middle class. You know, we have a middle class in El Salvador, but that middle class has been unable to prosper. And the United States has continuously offered solutions in the form of aid packages, monetary aid packages to stimulate big business and also to private enterprise, as it's called. We call it big business, but it's private enterprise, and also to stimulate security, to stimulate the militaries of countries in Central America because of this gang violence that Catherine was talking about. But the reality is that the United States has been looking at it differently. It's been looking at it in a wrong way. They've attributed gang violence to drug trafficking. And that's absolutely wrong because the violence, the gangs haven't come out of the drug trafficking. They've come out of this inequality that we're talking about.
So it seems like there's the gangs that the kids will join because they have a purpose and they join the gangs and maybe they can make money because they're part of this group. And then there's the Say that name again of the 14 families.
The oligarchy.
The oligarchy. So it seems like it's not equal. It's all out of whack.
That's right.
Of
That's
course,
right.
yeah, of course, it's incredibly unequal, excuse me. But one of the things that we at CISPACE are very excited about and want to make aware to people is the fact that after all these years of inequality, and particularly of these right-wing governments that are supported by U.S. presidents and our foreign affairs, is the fact that most recently, or very recently, the FMLN, which was the leftist party during the Civil War, were able to elect 2 presidents. And this is a very big deal for the country and for the people of El Salvador, because the FMLN has pioneered a number of really incredible social policies. As I mentioned, the recent policy to combat drug violence, or gang violence, excuse me. In addition, they have a wonderful program that we're working to support, which is a literacy program with the goal of eradicating illiteracy in the country. And the way this program works is that students in high school and middle school even will lead reading circles in very rural communities with mostly older women, though anyone is welcome. And it had incredible success rates, and we've seen in entire states of El Salvador that the illiteracy rate has been gone down to 0, and through these programs. And we're really excited about this. This is something that came out of their government, and this is a government in one of the poorest countries in the world during a financial crisis. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., we're seeing social programs, social funding being slashed all over the place because we can't afford it. And so we're very excited to see that many people in the government in El Salvador are really creating a new way of engaging the people, of supporting the people through these policies.
Isn't that amazing? Fantastic.
Now let me tell you that these social programs that she's talking about that have been started under the last 2 presidential administrations, this is not the same right-wing controlled groups of party members becoming president and starting to influence change in this way. This actually started in 2009 with the election of the first FMLN candidate. The FMLN is the collective party of the former guerrilla groups of the Civil War. And it wasn't until 2009 that the United States actually remained neutral in the elections. For the first time ever, the United States didn't back a particular candidate. And so what this meant was that it was a complete victory for El Salvador, because it was really, we could say it was the first democratic elections we've had. And these programs, now we're starting to see that the United States is starting to look at El Salvador and say, you know what? Yes, they elected a left party candidate twice, but this party is doing things differently. They're not looking for military aid to supposedly, fight the war on drugs, which, by the way, is one of the strategies of the U.S. right now is in Latin America is to fund militaries in order to stop the drug trade, and it simply has not worked. And El Salvador is a great example of having a government that is looking to fight violence and inequality in a different way, and this different way is through social programs, many of which have been consistently blocked by the right wing.
But it sounds like El Salvador is making advances, and it's terrific. We're going to look at a video of the history of El Salvador, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Oscar Romero, the assassination, or you call it something else. That this is the 35th year of that, which was a huge event, and we're going to talk about immigration and the traffickers. So let's look at the video and we'll come back to that.
De la mañana más 33 nosotros continuamos despertándole a usted que todavía no se quiere levantar. Me gustaría que usted también, que no se quiere levantar, pues lo haga, ¿verdad? Y si lo hace con la música de Radio Victoria, me alegraría mucho.
Más que mi tilde infalible, sos sencillamente mi propio abecedario, mi sexta vocal, mi nueva consonante, vos mi presente indicativo, mi futuro perfecto.
They don't let the workers go to the clinic. The girl was feeling ill and died, and here they say that it's not their fault. But it is their fault because they refuse to let us get health care.
We must demonstrate, we must strike, we must protest, and if we can't protest, then shout, but something must be done.
Entregar las tierras a los campesinos.
We in El Salvador find ourselves in a time when there are sectors that want to return to the past.
Que quieren retroceder al pasado.
For decades, farm workers, priests, and union members, as well as students and the political opposition, fought for land, democracy, and an end to poverty. Government forces used brutal repression and electoral fraud to prevent the implementation of these socio-economic changes. In the 1970s, the Salvadoran people took up arms as the only recourse for bringing about change. The Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, FMLN, was formed in 1980 to move forward the struggle, and an all-out civil war broke out that lasted 12 years.
When the war began in 1980, we in the labor movement expected that the people would take power by means of armed struggle. Thus, our labor movement was allied with the liberation forces, and as a result, we suffered every kind of repression: assassinations, persecutions, assassination attempts.
The main thing we were struggling for was a just society, for a different society. When we joined the struggle, the idea was to build a socialist society.
From 1980 to 1992, the United States spent $6 billion tax dollars supporting the Salvadoran dictatorship in a war that left over 75,000 people dead.
No hubiera habido la intervención
If it hadn't been for intervention on the part of the United States, perhaps our people would have had the chance to better resolve their internal problems. I believe that the Salvadoran people were very heroic and won many important achievements.
On January 16, 1992, the FMLN and the Salvadoran government signed the final peace accords, ending the war and laying the groundwork for demilitarization and democratization.
The FMLN gained a lot of space as far as the political arena goes, and the problem of militarism has been addressed well by the reduction of the size of the army and the paramilitary. But what wasn't addressed well enough in the negotiations process was economic issues.
Poverty levels in El Salvador have increased since 1992 by 7.2%. Around 60% of the 5.7 million inhabitants of this country live in poverty. And half of these live in absolute misery.
Given that the negotiated route didn't resolve the situation, there is still non-compliance with the accords. The electoral process has become the means by which we can change the balance of power in this country.
In the 1994 elections, the FMLN gets 14 seats in Congress and 11 municipal mayors.
The precise task that we must take on today is to dedicate the largest part of our time and efforts to making the economic and social changes a reality for our country.
Nombró una mal llamada comisión de alto nivel sin capacidad de querer resolver los problemas de la clase trabajadora.
La lógica de la política económica en El Salvador.
Economic policies in El Salvador have not been carried out the way the peace accords called for.
En los acuerdos de paz. La política económica.
There is a policy of structural adjustment based on neoliberal theories, and here in El Salvador they have been applied in a very dogmatic manner.
Neoliberales y que aquí en El Salvador se han aplicado de la forma más dogmática.
Neoliberalism is a political doctrine which mandates that the government relinquish its role in the economy and allow market forces and corporations free rein. Typical policies include free trade agreements, building free trade zones, selling of government industries, abolishing price controls for basic foods, and slashing social spending. Structural adjustment programs are conditions attached to loans from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other institutions. Typical conditions imposed include privatizing government-owned companies, devaluating currency, reducing or eliminating import tariffs, cutting social services.
In our country, they're asking us to make the following choice. Do you want to die by a firing squad? Do you want to die in the gas chamber? Do you want to die by hanging or by lethal injection? big business and the government give us these alternatives and ask us to choose, and maybe they want us to say by lethal injection that we die asleep.
Quiero morir durmiendo. Al final,
desde el 89, si ustedes bien lo saben, entra el primer gobierno neoliberal.
In 1989, as you know, the first neoliberal government took office when Arena won the elections.
Presidente Alfredo Cristian, con toda su política neoliberal.
Neoliberalism begins to try to take on much more difficult stances than previous administrations, in the sense that it has been a more repressive regime, more in alliance with big money in this country.
Más aglutinador del capital fuerte de este país.
No es posible, pues, que en este país sigamos con tantas arbitrariedades sociales. Nuestra intención es de manifestarnos pacíficamente durante este día en razón de la situación difícil.
El señor que se llevó el spray del portón.
Esa es toda la situación.
No, es que la situación es...
Hey, ¿qué le pasa? ¿Qué le pasa?
People who protest against neoliberal economic policies often encounter force and repression from state forces.
We understand that this country's economic policies are very much tied to the policy of structural adjustment and stabilization pushed by the World Bank, USAID, and the International Monetary Fund.
And through their policies, these institutions are quote-unquote pressuring the successive administrations to carry out privatization, but in reality, quote-unquote, the governments are happy to be pressured.
Today is the 35th anniversary of Oscar Romero. He was assassinated 35 years ago today.
Well, no, actually, he was assassinated, but we consider it to be a martyrdom. Now, it's a very significant day today because it is Oscar Romero Day, Monsignor Oscar Romero Day. And it's very special because finally his canonization has gone through. He will be turned into the saint that El Salvador has considered him to be in May. We're hoping for the Pope Francis, to actually go down to El Salvador. We're not sure yet, but he might go down to El Salvador for the ceremony. And it's a very significant thing because for the longest time, Monsignor Romero has been a symbol of the people, of all of the struggle of the war and of the struggle of people and inequality since then. And so we're extremely, extremely happy. And we seriously, we can't wait for that date to come.
Absolutely. I mean, Senor Romero is and has been a symbol of hope in El Salvador since, in his days as the Archbishop, he fully lived and believed the philosophy of putting the poor first and going with the poor. And this, back in the late 1970s, was an incredibly radical position for someone so high in the Catholic Church to take. And part of why his lifestyle was so powerful and continues to be so powerful today is because he's always put the poor first and lived amongst the poor and brought hope to the poor, and that continues to be a powerful image today, which is why we're so excited for the fact that he'll become a saint, because it's something that Salvadorans have known since his martyrdom, since he was assassinated while giving Mass in a church, shot down in front of his people. This is someone that we've known to be a light in the world and continue to serve as a light in the world for disadvantaged people everywhere. And so we're very excited for the rest of the world that may not know his story to know it as well and recognize it.
Shall we show a clip of Oscar Romero?
Absolutely, absolutely.
February 17, 1980, El Salvador's Archbishop Oscar Romero, a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, writes to President Carter. He pleads that the U.S. cancel a proposed $5.7 million in additional military assistance to the junta, and he warns that such interference will lead to a major bloodbath. Said the Archbishop, the contribution of your government, instead of favoring greater justice and peace in El Salvador, will undoubtedly sharpen the repression.
Archbishop Romero's plea would go ignored. The U.S. would soon provide the military assistance in question. And in the first 3 months of 1980, the New York Times would report 3,000 Salvadorans killed, countless others tortured, exiled, or disappeared. Casualties that well surpassed the entire 3-year reign of the deposed General Romero.
Early March 1980, civilian members of the second junta resign, citing their helplessness to control the repression. Once again, civilian replacements are quickly installed by the military.
March 23, 1980. During his Sunday sermon, broadcast nationwide, Archbishop Romero delivers a passionate appeal to police and military troops.
I wish to make a special appeal to the men of the Army, and in particular to the rank and file of the National Guard, of the police, and of the garrisons. Brothers, you are from among the same people. You kill your own kind. Above an order to kill given by a man, the law of God must prevail. Thou shalt not kill. No soldier is required to obey an order against the law of God. Now it is time to recover your conscience and to obey your conscience. No one must obey an immoral command.
March 24th, the very next day. Archbishop Romero is gunned down at the altar by a sharpshooter as he celebrates Mass.
Y adoremos la unidad de su majestad omnipotente, por nuestro Señor Jesucristo, tu Hijo, que siendo de vive y reina contigo en la unidad del Espíritu Santo, por los siglos de los siglos.
Shockwaves reverberate throughout El Salvador, Central America, and the world. Millions mourn the loss of this simple man of God, renowned globally for his sincere and courageous defense of human rights. March 30th, Palm Sunday. 130,000 Salvadorans gather from all over the country for Archbishop Romero's funeral in San Salvador. They march through the streets in mourning and in demonstration against the government. James Harney, American journalist, recalls how a nightmare of violence unfolded in broad daylight outside the cathedral as the solemn funeral mass was underway.
I was taking pictures in front of the cathedral, and it was an amazing experience. At one moment, the people were singing liturgical songs, and the next moment, they were running for their lives when a bomb was thrown from the top of the presidential palace. The government sharpshooters were stationed up there, and they began firing on the crowd. The people ran into the cathedral for cover. In the panic, many were trampled to death. Within a matter of minutes, between 7,000 and 8,000 people were jammed into the cathedral. Inside, people were yelling, "Hit the floor," in anticipation of the military sharpshooters firing into the cathedral. Moments later, the people were carrying in the wounded and the dead. One Salvadoran told me as I was in the cathedral, "Now you know what this government is all about, and you have the responsibility to go back to your own country and denounce it." And in the next breath, he said, "San Salvador has become a city of death."
When the bloodbath was over, the government forces played Beethoven's Ode to Joy through the loudspeakers to let the people know that it was safe to come out. out with their hands over their heads to show sharpshooters that they were unarmed. The United States State Department sent a letter of condolence to the church in El Salvador after the murder of Archbishop Romero. But in the course of events, the Secretary of State indicated that the United States would continue to support the military-civilian junta.
Archbishop Romero was the 7th priest to be murdered for speaking out against the government. In fact, the entire Jesuit order has received a death threat from the right-wing vigilante group known as the White Warriors Union. Since 1977, 27 priests have been forcibly expelled from the country, and others have been detained and tortured.
And still, the repression and the fighting...
Okay, so we're back, and we're going to talk about how people can get involved with CISPIS. Catherine.
Sure. So we'd love to have more people join us. This is a wonderful committee and organization. We're working on a number of really important projects right now, one of which is to support a constitutional amendment for El Salvador that would declare water to be a human right. So this is to help counteract the influence from corporations to privatize water. So this is a very important issue. As we've mentioned, that with inequality, not everyone has access to clean water, and so we want to ensure that in their constitution, water is mentioned to be a human right that all people deserve, and to keep it in the hands of the public. Another important initiative we're working on is a program coming out of the U.S. government, the Alliance for Prosperity. It's a proposed aid package for a number of Central American countries. However, we're concerned about a number of stipulations that are part of that aid package, including a focus on security, funding security organizations and militarization of the police, as well as some cuts to programs that we're particularly in support of. But one of the great things also that people can get involved with, we'd love anyone's support on both of those issues, but we're also going to be sending a brigade down to El Salvador this summer to support the literacy program I mentioned earlier. So this is the program that's working across the country to eradicate illiteracy. And the brigade from here in the U.S. will go down to support the teachers. As we mentioned, most of those teachers are high schoolers and middle schoolers. So we're not only going to support them in their work, but also to help spread the word about these programs. As we've mentioned, funding has frequently been an issue for this program, so it's a great opportunity for us to support a program that could use so much more money. And by going down, we're helping to raise awareness to among potential students, to support the teachers who are already there. And we're really interested in bringing more people down to El Salvador to learn about this amazing program, to contribute to the program, and to learn about this wonderful and beautiful country that is such a special place, and to really take action and get involved. So for people who are interested in getting involved in any of those programs or any of our work in the future, we'd love to have you come to our website, www.cispace.org, or to our Facebook page. We have a page for our Boston chapter, but this is a national organization. And we're really open to anyone coming and joining us, because this is a wonderful organization that's supporting people. This is a committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador, and I think anyone and everyone can be in solidarity with the people of El Salvador and work with us to help combat inequality, and we'd love to have everyone, and we're really excited for the programs coming up.
Ephraim?
Absolutely. It's if there's an organization that has been at the forefront of all of issues pertaining to El Salvador, it has been CISPIS, and that's why my involvement has been so great in it, because if there's anything that anybody can do to spread democracy, then if democracy is something that has not been spread by the U.S. policy in the past, and now with the social movement here in the United States, it was Americans who started CISPIS, Americans working with Salvadorans, and together we have fought so many battles together, and we've had so many great successes. And we can only see that El Salvador is moving forward. It's moving forward with its current administration. It's moving forward with its social programs. We don't want to see those social programs go away. We don't want to see money going to militarization, to making the police forces look like they're the army. What we want to see is an El Salvador that prospers, an El Salvador that Salvadorans can go and live in. I know that my family would love to go back to El Salvador and see it the way that they remember it in the past when things weren't as bad, you know? And things are only getting better. Mm-hmm. But change does not come immediately. Change is gradual. Change is slow sometimes, but changes are being made.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're working to build and fulfill the legacy of Oscar Romero, and this is a very important day to us, as we've mentioned, and we think that his story can really speak to a lot of people, and a lot of individuals have seen that story as a call to action, and we hope people continue to, and also remembering that, you know, these are two countries that are incredibly linked and continue to be linked, as we've seen with the recent events over the summer with all the children coming here. There are many, many issues at play. There are many different ways for people to get involved, and we as Americans have a deep, deep relationship with Salvadorans, and it's a wonderful place and wonderful opportunity to continue developing changes for the better, changes for the positive. Another program that we've seen in El Salvador, thanks to the FMLN government, is a really wonderful program in their schools. And so one of the things that you tend to see in El Salvador and a number of other countries is the difference between what something is named and the reality of something. So public education for a long time in El Salvador has not been public, in that while there's no tuition, there are fees for books, there are fees for clothing, there are for uniforms that really are prohibitive for many, many people in El Salvador. And so one of the great programs we've seen, thanks to the FMLN government, is a school supply program. And actually, when I was down in El Salvador in January, I went with my friends to the school, and we got to pick up shoes, uniforms, books, pens, pencils, everything a student could need for the entire year. And this is something that's across the entire country. Everyone has access to this. And these are the kind of programs that we want to continue to support, and that honestly we would love to see come to the U.S. It's a government that is, as we've mentioned before, investing in social programs, and there's so much to learn between the two nations, and that's what's really great about CISPACE and our work, is that we're there to stand in solidarity, and part of being in solidarity is learning from other people as well.
Well, it looks like the El Salvador people are very blessed to have the both of you here in New England, going down there and doing all the things that you do now. CISPIS is a national organization, of course, right?
That's right, that's right.
But you guys are running the show, it sounds like.
No, no. It's a solidarity group,
okay,
and you know that means that everybody needs to participate for it to work.
Yeah.
So we invite everyone and anyone to join CISPIS and join the fight.
And that's what building a movement is all about. It's about including everyone. Everyone has something to contribute. Advocacy starts with small steps. It starts with little changes in your day-to-day life, and it grows into these major changes and huge cultural shifts that are thanks to the small work of everyday people. So we, by no means, I certainly for myself, am not running things, but I'm happy to be part of it, and there's a place for everyone.
Well, I want to thank you for being here tonight. You have really brought us all into the world of El Salvador, and there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope.
Absolutely.
And this is, it sounds like people are going to be living the El Salvadorian dream, right?
I
Yes,
hope so.
hopefully in the future.
Tell us your website again.
www.cispis.org. cispis.org.
Okay.
Yep.
One more. So we have a couple more minutes. You want to just say anything? Another minute before we wrap it up? Facebook page or?
Yeah, definitely. If you're on Facebook, join the Facebook page. It's Boston. It's CISPIS Boston, and you can see all sorts of posts about what we're doing, what we're going to be doing, and how to get into contact with us. And we hope that we've already got a bunch of likes on it already, and we hope that we get more.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ephraim Rodriguez and Catherine Connolly.
Well, thank
from
you.
CISPIS.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really an honor. We're so happy to be
Well,
here.
it's all because of Charlie Tesh bringing us here tonight, and
thanks to Charlie also.
and to SCATV. Thank you very much. And they're telling us to talk for a few more seconds, and I guess we're good. No? Yes. And